Ryan, today we're not only going to look at pitch decks for their go-to-market strategy, but I want to start off with this question. How has getting traction for funding changed with AI native startups? How has it stayed the same? This is going to be the opening question, and I just want to encourage everyone to use the Q&A box or chat to ask questions. If you are watching this on YouTube, on the socials, make sure you drop your question. Happy to answer. We will definitely prioritize those of you who are in our live audience. Thank you so much. But the question is, how has getting traction for funding changed with AI native startups? And how has it stayed the same? I think it's worth it to take a look at that side. Ryan, you first. What do you think?
Yeah, man. So look, is a cool question. So the ways that it stayed the same, let's start there. It's still very necessary. They still want to see a lot of the same things. How has it changed? They want to see them a lot sooner, right? The idea that you're going to go get money to build a prototype, they're like, why do you need money to build a prototype? You can just go do this, depending on what you're building, right? I was just part of a conversation and with the CEO and founder of Lovable and one of the VPs of marketing over at HubSpot, and they were talking about this exact thing. Which is that you can launch an MVP in hours or a week, and with very little capital. Now, is it going to be your final product, and you just go and scale this thing to the world and sell? No, probably not. But the idea that you need a ton of money to go build a prototype, right? So there's an expectation that you're going to show up to the initial meetings pre-funding. Pre any funding, right? With, you got a couple $100 you can put on Amex, you can get the tools you need to go build a basic version of what you want to do, at least a workable prototype so you can show off. And so what that does is change the rest of the traction curve. So if we think about like the way traction traditionally worked, was that like oftentimes it'd be this like long process of bootstrap and maybe scrape together a little capital and slowly build up enough product to start to put it out to people and gain some actual traction, maybe some paying customers, but certainly some user feedback, something that showed that the world cares about our idea, right? Now, because we've taken away this flat, long part of the curve around getting something viable out to the market, all of a sudden the expectations are that, well, you should have that. And because you have that so fast and so cheap, you should probably show us that you understand how to distribute this thing, right? And I think that, again, we've talked about this a couple of times over the last few weeks, but distribution has always been critical, right? Always has been. I think it's one of those questions where I think from an investor standpoint, I think it's fantastic because we can start to ask for this sooner, right? We can say like, okay, so let's talk about distribution. We know you've got your MVP. You built something beautiful in Lovable or whatever your MVP and kind of basic tool choice is. How are you distributing it, right? That used to be a question that founders could somewhat legitimately punt by like saying, look, we're really just focused on getting the product. We got a little bit of distribution within like a core audience and we're getting feedback and whatever.
Very true.
Bullshit, right?
Yep.
Not anymore.
Oh, yeah.
Now it can get right to distribution. And we've said this, but distribution is your moat now because product sure as heck isn't, for all the reasons we just discussed.
But let's look at some of the dangers here because exactly what you said. But now anybody can go and hack together a product that's pretty darn good. I know founders here in this community that said, you know what? I'm done with my dev shop. I'm just going to go straight into working, with Claude Code, or Replit, or any one of those. And they're getting somewhere. But what do you think about, Ryan, sort of that false sense, that false start, kind of that temptation to build first and plunk away at it? And because I'm a magician, I can just wave a magic wand and things will start to happen. And I think a lot of founders completely ignore distribution. So whereas it's a boon in one area where investors can say, great, I get to see a product and we get to traction a little faster, I think the opposite can happen for founders. What do you think?
I don't know that that's a super big danger in my mind. I understand what you're saying. And of course, just building and building and building and building without any validation. But I think the problem was this has always happened. But it used to take a hell of a lot longer to realize, right? Like,
Good point.
You know my feelings on the word pivot, right? That just means we built the wrong stuff first. That's
Sure.
all that means. And so now we can build faster and find that out at least. So you always have to start with the problem, right? You always have to start with the problem. And you want to go validate that stuff first before you build anything. I think that the question now is that from the minute we finish mom testing within the market and we go out there and we ask those questions and we find out, why isn't the incumbent solution working for you? What is it about that that's still falling short? What is that little gap that is our window of opportunity? Then we can go build that little gap way faster. Because part of the discussion, one of the things that came up was that even big firms like McKinsey, McKinsey was referenced as saying that they've gone from taking 3 months to build out custom tooling for their bigger clients to 2 weeks. Specifically, they were talking about using Lovable in this case, right?
Wow.
So how insane is that?
That's crazy.
Right? A company with that kind of resource, right? With that kind of brain power, has managed to shorten their cycle from 3 months plus to deliver a tool to a couple of weeks. It's wild, right? So I get your point. And yeah, we don't want people endlessly tinkering, but here's the thing. Engineers have always done that. Technical founders have always loved to do that. They'd much rather stay on the lab bench where it's safe, where nobody can give them an opinion on the product, and just tinker away. Like maybe just this one more feature and then it'll be ready. Maybe this one more thing and then it'll be ready. I think the beauty is now we can get to that point where we feel comfortable to release because the babies aren't ugly anymore, right? You can build
Oh,
something really pretty, really slick, really smooth, really fast,
right.
and you can get it out there, right? So I think look, there is a danger in what you're saying, but I think that to me, it's far minimized compared to the upside of being able to get to this point where we don't have the luxury of ignoring distribution. We don't have the luxury of ignoring the audience because the thing is ready.
I think we both would recognize that, yes, the principles of idea validation, demand discovery, customer discovery are always going to stay the same. Start with the problem. On your side, you're saying, man, this is great because let's say you're the optimist here. This is great because now our babies aren't as ugly after we've done the customer discovery. We've gone out there, validated the problems. We are off to the races and we can actually get to traction so much quicker. And that's great for investors. That's great for founders. That's great for startups as a whole. I accept that.
Yes.
The pessimistic side of me says now founders are even more tempted not to do customer discovery, idea validation, not to actually go out there first because they've got this sandbox and all these amazing toys to play with. And I'm going to even go further. And I'm a big fan of Y Combinator, everyone. Don't get me wrong here. But I heard them say something that irked me just a little bit. And I think it applies for the top 1% of founders out there. But they said, you know what, with these tools, now don't worry about selling first or trying to get it out there. Just build and see if you can hack together something like absolutely ingenious and amazing. And while I think that's definitely in the cards for some founders, I just don't think it's the wisest advice for the general population to go out there and say, hey, just stay in your room and build something until something magical happens. I think that can be really tricky to adopt that approach.
I don't disagree with that at all, Ed. Let me devil's advocate around your core point here, though, right? I don't think that, yes, it makes this somewhat easier to do that, right? I don't know if that's a bad thing, because here's the thing. If you don't go out and validate your problem, if you don't go out and validate the market and you go build something, which founders do all the time, right? This happens all the time already. I don't know that this is going to create more of that behavior or not. What I do know is it will accelerate when the bill comes due. I don't think the cost will be any higher.
Interesting. Yeah.
The bill comes due sooner, which in this case, now sometimes it's a bad thing, but in this case, the sooner that bill comes due and you realize, cool, we built a thing, but nobody really wants the thing. I guess we should go figure out what people want. The sooner somebody comes to that realization, the better, because they'll have paid less time cost, less emotion cost, maybe less cash cost, less total cost overall. So I still am going to land, and this isn't blind optimism. This is just me looking at it and doing the calculus and saying, I still think we end up in a better place.
That's really, really good points. And I think that what we're talking about here is all bets are off. We're in a completely new inflection point. It's a new era, right?
It is.
And that's what's exciting. And we're seeing a lot of founders at the same time do some really cool things out there. Ryan, let me expand this conversation. We're going to get very, very detailed in terms of tactically what founders should be thinking of. Once again, use the Q&A box or chat to ask questions. I know this is a bit of an abstract conversation, but Ryan, this is what used to happen out there. And we can say to various degrees, and this was the common prevailing advice, especially in lean startup mode, is go and build something, an MVP, demo it, and then try to sell. Pretty straightforward. And I think the default is definitely still alive and well. But then I think in this new AI native environment, let me break this down. You can demo, sell, build. And I ripped this off from Ash Maurya from the Lean Canvas. He developed the Lean Canvas.
Yep.
So he's all about demo, sell, build. This was before AI. Now, my contention is the demo can be something that's built using some of these tools. You can get to a demo faster and then sell and then build the next thing or build more of the finalized thing. What do you think about this dichotomy that is currently being discussed out there in the startup world?
I think this is what I've been advocating for a long time anyways, right? To me, this is customer discovery, customer interviews, and idea and problem and solution validation done right, right? Those demos. I know you're saying this in a slightly different way, which is that you can actually just go out there and kind of like loosely build something and begin to demo it right now. What I'm saying is that by digging into people's problems and understanding what they've already tried, and then understanding what that little window of opportunity is, you can demo in that moment, right? You can
Sure.
start to postulate, you can start to propose what the solution to that would look like. They can buy the concept. So now you've sold, right? So now we've demoed and sold. Then we can go build the solution, right? Sometimes this is also why when people are coming to me with product ideas, I'm often asking them, how do we run this as a service-based proxy?
Right.
Right? How do we proxy this thing so that we can actually start delivering the service now, so that we understand what the requisite steps to get to the transformation are, so that we know we're building the right thing? Because too often what I've seen in a more strict build, demo, sell model is that you build, it goes okay, you demo, it goes well enough, you sell, and then after purchase, once people are actually using the product or service, they don't get the desired outcome, a la pivot, right? This is where that comes from. I don't want that to happen. I want to understand that I am going to create the right conditions for the transformation that is desired by both me and the user before I begin doing any of this stuff, right? Because look, I don't care what you're building with. I know we're talking about, how to gain traction for AI native startups, but like AI is just the means. Outcomes are the product, right? Traction starts when a real job gets done faster, cheaper, better, right? Nothing happens before that, right?
And investors
Nothing.
are arguing that right now because they're starting to see founders build something with AI just to get funded. And that's if I slap some AI on it, Will calls it the AI pixie dust, then I'll get
Yep.
funded. And investors are saying, no, I want you to actually show me how a customer's using it, that
Yeah.
it does make their life better, that they'll continue to buy. Because some people argue a lot of what founders are building right now, AI isn't even necessary, just maybe a really strong algorithm, which is different than all this generative
Yep.
AI, LLM wrappers. And people are saying, just like back in the crypto days, I'm just going to turn everything into an NFT. I'm going to put everything on the blockchain. You're
Yep.
talking about, hey, during this demo phase, let's really make sure that customers can see the value because investors want to know that you've answered that question.
Can get the value. Can get the value, right? See the value is a little different. I'm not trying to mince words here, but see the value is a little bit different. Here's the challenge, right? Like, and I want to pick on something else, not pick on, but I want to double click on something that you said, which was around the AI wrapper, right? So there's this whole thing, right, where that's just an AI wrapper. We're AI native. Don't care. It doesn't matter. It really
Yeah.
doesn't.
Yeah.
Because again, that's just the means. What is the outcome that you're driving? I think too many founders are leaning on, well, we're AI native. We're not just a wrapper. Doesn't matter. Does it help do the job better? Does it actually get to an outcome? Because if it doesn't, then we haven't really gotten anywhere, right? So showing the value, having customers see the value is great. Having customers get the value, significantly better, right? I want to be able to show the after state. I want to be able to achieve the after state because demos impress, but outcomes convert, right? And this is at the customer phase. This is at the investor phase, right? I want to build for the repeat, not just the first use case, right? I want to be able to show we can create this outcome and value over and over and over again. And that all goes back to the pain, right? And so often now I'm seeing like, we're AI native, we do this, we do that. And like, I can't, from all you've told me, I can't name the pain. I can't name the pain that you actually solve for, right? I feel
Right.
my pain and not understanding, but I can't name the pain that you solve for. And man, if you cannot name the pain in a single sentence, you cannot market the cure, which
You're,
means when you get to that distribution phase, dead in water.
you're absolutely right. Let's get a little even more explicit. For example, we have a founder and I really appreciate her. And she's doing what she said. She's going out and she's doing 100 customer discovery interviews. And then on
Good.
the consumer side, then 100 on the provider or the enterprise side.
Huh.
And she's going out there and her idea validation deck is her demo. Like you said,
Yep.
it's going out there having that conversation. And she came to me yesterday and she said, Ed, I'm getting so much good feedback. Everyone's validating the idea, but here's the additional feedback I'm getting. Everybody's asking me, does it connect to a CRM? And she said, is my idea validated? And I said, you know what? She asked, what should I do with that feedback? I said, that's gold because they're actually telling you what their pain point is. Now you need to be asking, why are you asking that? What's been your
Yeah.
experience with other CRMs, et cetera? And I said, now you know what to build. And let's say 80 out of the 100 say CRM. Well, you've got your go-to-market strategy. Build that one little feature first, and then go back to them and say, hey, you know what you complained about? I built it.
All right. I have very little information about the situation that you just described, but I have a concern.
Sure.
I have a concern because it sounds like this founder may be out there pitching the solution, which is not conducting customer interviews. It is not
Yes.
the same thing.
Yes.
Customer interviews are talking to them about their problems, about how they've tried to solve them historically, around why that's still dissatisfactory. Now, you can then, once you've got that, right, you can conduct this call in two parts, but it has to be done in two parts. And if you mix the two parts, in my opinion, it invalidates most of the findings.
That's
Because
really
if you
great.
start asking people, would you use this? Would this work? Because, and it sounds like they are, because they're like, well, does it connect to a CRM? Is that really their core problem? It's not. It's not. It's not. It doesn't matter, because if it solves the problem outright, whether it connects to a CRM or not, it's a detail. That is not the problem. Right. So I'm concerned, before this founder goes out and conducts a full 100 of each of these things, that we back up and make sure that we're not out looking to validate our ideas, but to validate the problem, and to let the problem validation indicate whether the solution is valid.
Perfect. Let's stop and pause there, everyone. What Ryan is talking about, so many founders do, and I'm actually glad I tripped over this wire and to explain it. Go and validate the problem before validating your proposed solution. A lot of the founders at Startups.com, that's what they do. They go and pitch slap and they say, okay, I'm planning on doing this. And when we asked, if you've done any form of customer discovery, they say, yeah, I went and told them what I'm going to build and everyone said they want it. That's not customer discovery. That's not actually the process we're talking about. Now, to credit this founder, she went out first and she asked, what are you trying to do in terms of your branding and marketing strategy? And she found out they were saying, well, community is the biggest thing. And she said, what are your challenges with community?
Okay. So
And
the customer interviews at that level were already done.
and she already has a lot of connections into that space with CMOs at brands. She even said, you know what? I think I'm going to focus, based on what I heard, on the health and beauty sort of industry. So she narrowed it down, and she realized that the major pain point is, they said, to build community, we have to use like 30 different tools.
Yeah.
She said, that's very interesting. So then she started, prototyping the idea and came up with just a real quick 3-slide deck that expanded as she started doing it. So this has been evolution. This is months in the making. And I think, Ryan, you would say that's the proper way to do it.
Sounds like the process was followed, right? And it sounds like she's perfectly validated in doing what she's doing. So that's fantastic. Yes. So very frequently that first step is skipped, and we just jump into the pitch slap, and we're just like, would you use this? Would you use this? Would you use this? Hold on. Let me predict the future. I can't do that. Nobody can. That's the problem with asking, would you use, would you pay, would you, right? It's nonsense. They don't mean to lie to you, but they will.
And that's where founders fall into a solution looking for a problem. They start off with what they want in their head, and then they go and try and find anything to confirm their cognitive biases out there.
And they will get better at it. That's the problem. So this is actually one of the crazy traps of doing this the wrong way. Eventually you will think you're right, because eventually you will get so good at unconsciously manipulating those conversations to hear the things that you needed to hear, that you will eventually get them. And then you will go and build the thing. And then you'll be really surprised with all those people who said they would use this thing aren't going to use this thing now, right? Because you asked them to do something they're incapable of, which predict the future. And you did it under very, very manipulated conditions, because you were out seeking your truth, not their truth.
And we're saying that AI is a very interesting lever in today's startup ecosystem, where you can either accelerate that. I would contend that you can fall into that trap, while at the same time, you're saying, Ryan, if we just follow these principles that we're talking about, AI is going to be really an accelerator, an amplifier to help founders achieve what they're trying to do in terms of raising funds or getting customers.
Look, if you're following a bad process, great tools will still yield bad results. If you're following the right process, a tool like AI, the various manifestations of AI, will make that process faster, cheaper, and better. But it starts with the process, right? I always analogize, let me analogize this to like sports. I'm not a baseball player. Wait, you're Canadian. Let's go hockey. I know you guys have a baseball team or two, but not really. So all right, one of our new members is a big Blue Jays fan, so I have to throw that out there. So look, hockey, right? If you put $20 skates on me and send me out on the ice, or you put $1,500 skates on me and send me out on the ice, you're going to get the same crap results, because my process for playing hockey is awful. I don't know how to skate. I don't know hockey.
Right.
So putting better tooling in isn't going to change anything. Right. But if I'm following a correct process, and I've come up through the feeder system, and I've played in the leagues, and I've gone to the trainings, and I've done the camps, and I have good skills, giving me better equipment is likely to make me a better player. But you've got to be a great player first. So if you're not doing this right as a founder, if you're choosing to shortcut in the wrong places, you're choosing to jump ahead and try to cheat the system, go ahead. You will pay the bill. But like I said, it probably will come due sooner. which is actually a benefit. But if you just do it right, you'll get where you actually want to be with less of the pivoting, with less of the pain, and just more of the outcomes you're trying to drive for your users.
Let's look at this pitch deck with this lens
Let's
in
go.
terms of getting customers in an AI native environment right now. Now, to fill everybody in, Ryan, as usual, we went through this with Will and we sent off the video in terms of problem solution market. We got to how it works. And in general, want to do the second half of this pitch deck, Ryan, and get your CMO brain
Okay.
on it in terms of how do we get the traction in this new amazing world that we live in. So this is UniLearn, and I'm just going to gloss over and Ryan, you can ask questions along the way. In terms of we're combining AI with mentoring for personalized project-based learning. It's like an Edtech for online courses. And we're
Okay.
arguing that right now, the current state of the problem is that most people can't complete their courses. They're dissatisfied with online learning, especially focusing, you'll see later, there's a focus on Asian countries where education and being able to complete the course, get the certification is super important.
Is this geared towards like certification type stuff? Because it just to pick on a little bit, go back to the very first screen. I'd love to know for who here, right?
Exactly.
Because this is so broad, right? This is so broad. Personalized project-based learning, right? For who, right? Help me understand who this is for. Because
Let me
that will
highlight
help me a ton.
everyone. Ryan said that because I specifically asked him to look at it like an investor with a CMO background, right? Which investors
Yep.
will do. And Ryan, we're going to get to that. That's actually immediately one of the gaps that we recognized. Let's say the solution then is going to be AI and some cool ideas here in terms of, hey, I got a big idea, and the AI creates the project plan, the path for you, loops in mentors and people, it's customized. And we're saying doing that, AI can actually help you with course completion, with satisfaction, everything like that. We're going to just take that for granted, even though
Okay.
we added a lot of feedback in how we can fix this solution side, connecting with the problem. Here's the market. So we went from all of global education, right? Which
That's not their TAM. That's the industry,
Will
right? That's
pointed
the
that out.
industry size. That's not TAM. Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
But the interesting thing was ICP, so ideal customer profile learners in East and Southeast Asia, which then I said, hey, I've been there, being Korean myself, living in China, understanding what it's like over there. This actually is a problem. And I wished that we would focus on that a little more. So let's just say it is the East and Southeast Asian learners out there where this is important, for them. Gonna
I'd
ignore
still love
the
to narrow that more, right? Because I think when we get into me talking about like how we want to achieve traction, one of the first things I'm going to say is pick a narrow wedge, right? Like this is just a blunt force trauma to a market at this point.
Well, and we're always on the same page. I actually said, I think that this East and Southeast Asian market needs to be the TAM, and then we need to segment down exactly as you're
Yes.
saying. That's what we'd like to
let's
see.
let's pause on that for a second because I think it's
Sure.
important for everybody listening to this is working on their own TAMs. The reason $389 billion isn't the TAM is that is not the total addressable market. You cannot, unless you plan to replace every single course, all of the information, all of the other things that get bought in this market.
Right.
That is not your TAM. That is the industry size. And that is not your TAM, right? It would be as if I was like, I have a cool fuel additive that will give you 5 more miles to the gallon, regardless of your car, right? If you're still driving a petrol automobile. And then I cite the size of the entire petrochemicals market. That's the industry. That is not my market size, right? That's not my market size. My market size is some smaller segment of people who need to improve their gas mileage and are willing to pay a little bit for it.
Let's highlight again why Ryan's saying what he's saying. Now, from an investor standpoint, we can see a mile away when founders just throw out top-down TAM and say,
Yep.
Cybersecurity is $1 trillion industry and it's growing so much every year. And if we just make 1% of that, we're all going to be rich. Yay. We see through that because we go into the mindset what Ryan has. How do you even fathom getting that size of market? We need to see some thoughtfulness in the strategy. And therefore, the bigger TAM that you create, if it's not big enough, VCs aren't going to be interested. But if it's too big, you create friction. And this is what happens. We start thinking the way Ryan's talking about. Any more thoughts on this, Ryan?
No, I don't think so. I mean, yeah, I think again, well, actually, sorry, back up 1 second because there was some text at the top that I didn't see there. 43 million graduates and early career learners. Okay, so there we've narrowed this a little bit. So I'd love to see this carried back up to that problem slide. Right. This is who we're talking about. And even to the title slide where we talk about the graduates and early career learners, whether you want to drop Asia in there or not, and the number or not doesn't matter. But help me to understand who you're talking about, because as we go through all of this, it contextualizes it so much more and allows me to attach myself to the problem. Right? When I don't know who it is actually, I have to imagine. And I would have gotten this wrong. I wouldn't have imagined the right people, and therefore I would have been confused, or maybe even just disagree with the solution.
Now let's pause for a moment. The founder actually is in our audience here. I'm not going to call
Aha.
anybody out, but this happens every time, everybody. Founders sit there and go, no, this is what I really meant. Oh, you totally misinterpreted it wrong. I wish you would have understood it. But that's the whole point, is we're
Yep.
giving feedback on a screener introductory deck where you're not over the shoulder. There's no voiceover. You don't have any mulligans at it. And so we're really narrowing it down because we want you to sharpen the tip of the arrow so it flies true, gets through all the initial resistance so that investors say, there's something really interesting here. I want to pick up the phone or reach out and book the next meeting versus I'm going to make a investing decision right here on the spot. It just doesn't happen. So how it works, we just went through this and we said, okay, there's some good stuff here in terms of, hey, let's take a quiz to learn the learning style and then build the projects and get facilitation and then showcase your progress. We thought that was really neat and novel. And Will had comments about, hey, this is a way we could communicate a little more. But we just wanted to say, hey, we believe that AI could actually do this, which makes everything plausible. And to me, that's what's kind of exciting about this project. Ryan, thoughts on this quickly?
I can buy the how it works.
Yep.
It makes sense. Again, the more it's tied to a specific type of user, the easier it is to illustrate this and make me believe.
Right.
Right. Because if you're trying to identify any learning style, that's harder to pull off technically. That's harder to market. Right. It's harder to distribute. But if you know that these are all graduate level learners, we know something about their learning style. We know something about their capability. We know something about their personalities, right? Because they've achieved something. So, and I'm not saying it has to be that, but if you give me something as a platform that I can push off on, all right, give me put some handles on the concept so I can grasp this. It goes so much further, all right? Because if I can see a narrow problem, narrow user, I can start to imagine wide impact, right? Because I can see where it happens. The challenge becomes right now, it's still really foggy for me in terms of exactly who, where, and whether technologically this will be simple to pull off, possible to pull off, or nearly impossible to pull off.
That's a good point right there. One of the things I want to add here, double clicking this time on something that you said, because of my experience, we could easily create an ICP because I know for a fact there are students that graduate out of universities locally in Asia and they have no differentiation. They're kind of like lost and they can't compete in the market. So augmenting, and this is where we did have an Edtech that we got investment for in China, stood up, and then I moved over and registered it in California, and actually became a university. The hunger for that, just the edge out there, they're willing to do what it takes. So to your point, if we said Sally graduated from this university in Asia, and now she's, just waffling in this job market. She goes online to our solution and then takes this certification course, gets connected with a mentor and gets like a stamp and now can showcase it, goes in her resume, and then she gets hired. That would be a better example of a focused customer journey as well as a semblance of a go-to-market strategy that investors would say, yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yes. And so what have you done there? You specified a better problem, because the problem that was stated, and I don't clearly remember exactly how it put it, but the problem that was stated isn't the actual problem. The problem is that I didn't complete an online course. Who cares? The problem isn't that the experience was frustrating. Who cares? The problem is there's an outcome on the other side of those things that I should want as a user. Why did I start that course in the first place? If I wanted a certification, maybe it doesn't matter how clunky the process is. I'll complete it because I need the certification. I want that certification. I don't even want the certification. What do I want? The job or the pay raise or the clarity of purpose or the recognition that comes from that. That's the transformation. And that's why the narrower we get, the easier that is to convey. Doesn't mean we have to stay there forever, right? But we've got to start somewhere. And I will argue till I am blue in the face that, especially at the beginning, the narrower we go, the faster we move. Right?
100%.
The faster we will actually start to have impact. If you can win one workflow for one type of person that hurts every day, you will get customers and you will be able to expand that.
Just to belabor this point, everyone, if you're thinking about this, and this applies to all different types of solutions, in China, we narrowed it down to people working in HR departments who wanted to be promoted into more strategic positions in the company, like directors and C-suite. And then further, we narrowed down our go-to-market strategy, which we're going to get to the CEOs who were frustrated by their HR departments, and we ended up selling to them, and they ended up just paying for all their department, to use our solution. We are saying this because we don't understand the pitch deck right now, because the founder might be thinking that's not what I meant, and we've got a totally different thing. But we're just giving out principles for all of you out there just to think through and what you want to communicate on the deck, not exactly how to go about with this startup. We're not gatekeepers here, but because it hasn't been clear, that's why we have to kind of go into some imagination, which we do as advisors.
Yes. Look, what we're giving is a framework for understanding how an investor might look at this thing and why they won't say yes based on how it's perceived right now. All right. Don't necessarily have the answers to what you need to say or which direction to go or how to build that product. But what we can say is that if things are left this broad, it's much, much harder for an investor to get excited and want to get involved. Right? Because if they don't believe in the problem, the solution doesn't matter. If they don't believe the solution works, the market size doesn't matter. They don't believe in the market size, who cares how it works? Doesn't matter. It's irrelevant, right? I've said this before, but those first 3 slides in the pitch deck are where we set the hook around, should I care about this? Is there something here? Every slide after those first 3 is, should I care about this particular startup and this particular founder solving that problem enough to give them my money? Right? It's a tale in 2 parts.
Get to the business model slide here. And Ryan, we're just going to take for granted that there is a business model. Not going to jump into it, but I do want to point out here, Ryan, and I'm sure you've got comments. All of a sudden, we've introduced expand via creators. And just like Ryan said, so timely. Up until this point in time, we have never mentioned creators once, and suddenly we're introducing a new concept that immediately puts more friction, and it could very well be the non-starter for the investor when they're looking at this.
Yeah, it definitely raises some questions. Now, if that's intentionally placed to try to create a question, okay, but be very cautious about that. Or if it's dropped there because you want them to ask, well, what do you mean via creators? Well, we're actually going to go directly to the course creators so they can implement our tool. Or does that just mean we're going to use influencer marketing? I don't know. Are we talking about a channel or a fundamental aspect of the business? I don't know.
That's where we live in our language. So, Ryan, I'm glad you pointed that out as well, because I automatically thought creators as mentors, creating the courses. How does that all come together? And we don't see mentors notice till later on. And so we're just going to give this a mulligan here and say, okay, there's some type of business model. The most important slide that we want to get to, and we'll end off here, is the go-to-market. So, Ryan, typical, very straightforward. We see phase growth from organic traction to network effects, phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. And they've got a laundry list of check marks, and there are empty boxes right in there. And it implies to me that we haven't done any of this yet. I don't know how you're interpreting, but walk us through how you look at this slide right away from your perspective.
I feel like I've just been shared on somebody's Asana board. Right? I that's not what I want here. Right? We talk about this a lot. And look, I'm not picking on this founder. This is what pretty much everybody does.
So common. Yeah.
What we really want to do here is talk about how we're going to reach that narrow wedge of a very specific archetype with a very specific problem that we're going to solve. And then we want to talk about where and how we're going to reach them, but more importantly, why. Saying that we're going to do SEO around project-based learning and upskilling. Okay, why? Why SEO? Why are we starting there? Why is that channel better than paid search, for example? Right? Paid search being far more immediate, gets you the same viewers more or less because it's going to be search based. When you paid search, I guarantee I can get in front of them. With SEO, I might get in front of them someday. So if we want to get to that traffic, maybe we just buy that instead. Right? So is there a reason? Is there a reason why we're doing this? Creator UGC, user showcase projects on TikTok, Red Note, and Meta. Okay, how are we making that happen? That's truly like UGC from our users? That's kind of like saying we're going to use email as a marketing channel. Why do I say that? Because you can't use email as a marketing channel primarily. You have to have the emails first. You had to get them somehow, right? So if we're going to use UGC, we had to get users to get the GC. So how are we getting those users in the first place? Is that a targeted campaign where we're going after specific creators? Right? We don't know. And again, why? Is it because they have proven to be influential already in this market? They are tastemakers. They are telling people how to do a better job with their project-based learning. So these are all things that are still really, really tough to interpret. Then when we get into like the phase 2, what they're really laid out here is if we had lots of money, this might be our marketing plan.
Exactly.
That's not go-to-market. It's not the same thing. This is a description of a funded marketing plan. So as an investor, what I want to understand is how you're planning to go to market with or without my money. I want to understand how you're going to go out and get distribution and why you're picking the particular channels.
Right.
Okay, so I don't want to pick on phase 1, phase 2, phase 3 because it's not important, right? Now, I do like seeing things like, once we've done this, then we can engage referral loops and incentivize sharing. Yes, but explain why, explain how it connects to the previous step. explain how it deepens the product and usage, not just it's an activity you like to have happen, because everybody wants referral loops. Most people execute it very poorly because it's not truly integral to the product, nor does it enhance my use of the product. Examples of that are things like, or Dropbox, right? But Skype being gone and dead now, Microsoft killed it. But that was a product where referral enhanced the use of the product, because the more people you had on Skype, the less you had to spend on telephony back in the day. The more people who are on Dropbox, the more people you can share with, right? It inherently, you have to have people on those platforms. Most people will say things like, well, we'll create referral loops. But if you're in a market, let's just pick on that. Actually, let's pick on that for a second. Sorry, Ed, I'm changing my mind. I'm going to pick on that one for a second, because depending on who we're asking to do the referring, if one of the outcomes we're trying to create is a competitive advantage by completing a course or certification, why the heck would I want to share my secret sauce with anybody else? There are actually a lot of products out there that create competitive advantage where the founders think they're going to be able to rely on referral, and it's exactly the opposite. The better it works, the more I want to keep it a secret.
Right.
So remind yourself always that we want to understand at a go-to-market, that we want to understand where and how, but more importantly, the why. Right? We want to understand why we're picking this particular market and why we're particularly picking these particular channels to reach that particular market. And it's got to be particular in all cases.
Ryan, let me point something out, and then I've got a follow-up question for you. Everyone, it is really popular to throw around buzz terms like network effects. A lot of times founders think if I throw that word in, investors will be like, oh yeah, absolutely, of course. What founders don't realize is you're actually stacking the deck against you, because of what Ryan said is you're not explaining why there's so many ways that you could get to network effects, and everybody pretty much makes mistakes. A lot of times people mistake scale effects for network effects and brand effects for network effects. So until you actually have that level of traction and you've proven it, the best thing to say is we've discovered that by this behavior, there's some network effects going on. So don't go out and make these very hyperbolic statements that you think are going to impress investors. It's going to do the opposite.
Yes. Based on the popularity of these blogs around this topic and how much influence they drive, we want to step into that market and use SEO as one of our go-to-market channels. Okay, cool. Now I know why you're going there. The reason I was laughing a second ago, Ed, as you were saying that, I was picturing as if investors were kind of like slot machines where you pull the lever and like, as long as the right symbols pop up, you win the jackpot. It's like AI native, AI native, network effects, 348 billion TAM, ding, 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 jackpot, gotcha. Right? And the coins start flowing. It's just not how it works, right? Like saying those things is great. Understanding why you're saying those things better, showing me that you've actually done something about those things, best.
Right away, if you look at this traction slide, everyone, I'm just going to set the stage here. We typically see a disconnect between traction and the go-to-market in the sense, and this is where kudos to the founder. I understand this traction. We already have 27 registered users, 1,000 mentor applications, 340 paid sessions, and we have an MVP with 80% completed in development. You've clearly done something to get traction.
Done some stuff here.
Gone to market, but it wasn't explained in the previous slide. Ryan, break that down for us.
Look, this is one of those, this has become a kind of an existential question around pitch decks. I have been advocating that we move our traction ahead of our go-to-market. Tell me what you've already accomplished, and then talk to me about how that informs what we're going to do next. Don't tell me what you're going to do next and leave me wondering, are they capable of anything at all? And then go on and tell me, oh, we've already done all this stuff. Like, that would have been useful information 3 minutes ago when we were on the previous slide. I think that assuming you have some traction and assuming it does relate to your go-to-market slide, if it doesn't, let's talk about why. And let's use that. Let's build some momentum with traction. Let's build momentum by showing them that we are capable of doing things. We've already accomplished some stuff, and then tell them what we're going to go do next to tackle this market. Doesn't that just make all the sense in the world?
It does. So let's do this exercise here. I advocate exactly what Ryan said. I still believe traction typically should go after the team slide, but you should be peppering in evidence along the way, such as, wait a second, if you have really great traction, like you are crushing it 10% week over week, and suddenly you're in the news and all this stuff, I say have it as literally your first slide as a summary. But here we've got 27 registered learners, organic pre-marketing, and 1,000 mentor applications. So what Ryan's talking about is, I would say, and curious what you think, say right on the go-to-market slide, we have already received 27 registrations using this organic, and here's why it worked. And here's how we're going to double down, expand. You're pouring gasoline on the fire. And we're just going to keep doing it. We're not going to go into different tricky things where suddenly in the ideal world, you give us $500,000 and we're able to go do this. Here's how we're able to get mentor applications. Here's what it means. 340 paid sessions, paid everyone, like somebody exchanged money. That is validation. You climbed what they call the ladder of proof. If you put in your go-to-market slide that you actually did all this stuff and here's what we learned, and here's now how we're going to double down on it, that would have been a better slide.
Yep, 100%. So tell me how some of this stuff happened, right? And then when we move to the next slide, it becomes much easier for me to understand why we're going to go do those things next, right? So how did we achieve these things, right? Paid sessions completed through MVP testing. I don't understand why we're throwing the MVP testing in there. It doesn't matter. That's not the how I'm looking for. I'm looking for where the heck did 340 paid sessions come from? Does that imply that we had around like, what is that, 11 point something per registered learner? Or is there a disconnect there? Do these stats relate to each other?
Right.
Right. Of the 1,000 mentors, how many of them got used in those paid sessions? Like, what is the connection between these numbers here? Right. Tell a math story. Don't just data dump. Explain why this is momentum. Right. And I'm not looking at the stuff to the right there. Product status, sort of care. I want to back up for just a second, Ed, because you said something that riled me. Which is that we have to put team before traction. Look, let me play smarmy devil's advocate.
Sure.
Cool. That's who you are. Great. That's who you are. What the hell have you done? Right.
Right.
If instead you show me traction, you show me go to market, and then you show me team, then I go, okay, congratulations. I see what you've accomplished, and I see what you're saying you're going to go do next. And I believe that you look like people who can go and do those things. If I know who you are before I know what you've done or what you intend to do, I'm not sure it matters much to me. Maybe that's just me.
Sure.
But I'm not sure that that's the story in order, because so often, and man, like, let's talk about team slides for 2 seconds. Don't put more than 2 people on that thing, maybe 3, if there are 3 co-founders.
Exactly.
But like, I saw a pitch deck last week. It had their admin on there.
Yeah.
I do not need to know who your secretary is. That is not going to drive success for the company. I don't need your org chart. I need to know, based on the story you're trying to tell and sell me, that the people who sit at the very apex of this thing are the ones who have the skills to get this done. Not everything either, right? I don't need to know that you also have a Python coder who's going to help you with the scraping that you're going to use for phase 3 of development. Like, no, I don't need that. I don't need that level of detail. You're just giving me stuff to scrutinize. You're just giving me more personalities to look at and go, not sure that's the guy or the gal.
Right.
I don't need that.
And to explain, I love riling Ryan up, by the way. This is good because it creates really good content. But we just demonstrated what Will and I talk about all the time, because people go to Will and say, Ed told me to do it this way. And then they come to me and say, Will told me to do it this way. And now Ryan's telling us something completely different. And it's just simply tools. And I just want to say, I completely agree with what Ryan says. If you have the traction and you're able to show it, move it up. I recommend this all the time. And a lot of times founders bury their traction slide later. And I'm like, no, this needs to be moved up. At the same time, again, not as a defense, a lot of times founders, some of you don't have that traction to lead with. You're at such an early stage where you are going to be saying things like, here's our team, and you're leading with the team because your team has got the social proof, the domain expertise, and you're saying, we have completed the product, but we don't have anything else going on as of yet. And sometimes that's going to be better order. What we're all advocating for is put the best foot forward. And in this case, Ryan, I would agree with you that this is one of those cases where clearly, for example, if let's say this was targeted to new Asian graduates who are lost, and suddenly they have already paid for 340 sessions, that's something that we want to talk about a lot earlier and integrate in the beginning parts of the deck.
Always put the components together in the order in which they tell the best story, right? Think about what you're conveying to an investor. But here's I have to suplex this one, Ed. You set me up for this. You ran right across the ring at me, and then you lowered your head. And I'm going to suplex you on this one. Yes, put team before traction if you don't have traction. If you don't have traction, put your damn pitch deck down and go get some traction, right?
Yeah.
That's going to be my thing, man. Like,
power bomb right there.
Enough traction to fill a traction slide. That needs to be mission number 1. This is critical, because we've already said this. Without traction, trying to get funded just on an idea in 2025, good luck, friends, right? It's not been possible for quite a while because investors don't have to. You can say, but it's such a good idea and it'll be great. And they're like, yeah, and they'll invest then when it is great. But until then, they've got 50, 60, 100 other startups they're looking at right now that are also great ideas that also have traction, right? You are not being evaluated in a vacuum ever. You are being evaluated on anywhere else they can put their money, right? Every other startup, every other possible investment. And so it is not enough to just say, but it's such a great idea. Awesome. There are lots of great ideas. The thing that separates great ideas from the fundable ones, traction, right? It is the thing that separates the wheat from the chaff, because this is the point where we can go, you're not just saying you can do, you're doing. That's what gives us confidence. This is the handmade check writing pen, Ed. And that's what gets that out of the pocket. Traction.
Ryan, I don't consider you giving that suplex. I consider that you tagging me in because I'm going to double power bomb this bad boy.
Yes.
And everyone, what Ryan exactly said, I wish all founders did that instead of coming to us and saying, help us raise money at that stage where you don't have traction. It's just an idea. And I got to find the investor that's going to give me the money to see my idea through. I wish founders went out and said, help us with traction first, and then we'll get to the point where raising money just becomes inevitable because of that traction. That would be my heart's desire, Ryan. I'd be tickled pink. It rarely happens, and that's why I think we have to do these power bombs and suplex, and we have to get in there.
We suplex them, we power bomb them, and then while they're still dazed and confused, we explain that they got to go find some traction.
Best way to end this, Ryan, this is fantastic. Founders out there, if you want something like this done with your pitch deck, just let us know. More than happy to do so. To this founder here, thank you so much for your courage in sending this forward and helping us help other founders and learn together. We'll send you this recording. Kudos to you. Ryan, a pleasure as always. I'll see you next week.